St. Augustine commentary on the Gospel of John, chapter 13, verse 1 to 5. The Lord's Supper, as set forth in John, must, with his assistance, be unfolded in a becoming number of lectures and explained with all the ability he is pleased to grant us. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them unto the end. Pascha, Passover, is not as some think a Greek noun, but a Hebrew, and yet there occurs in this noun a very suitable kind of accordance in the two languages. For inasmuch as the Greek word paschein means to suffer, therefore pascha, pascha, has been supposed to mean suffering, as if the noon derived its name from his passion. But in its own language, that is in Hebrew, pascha means Passover. Because the Pascha was then celebrated for the first time by God's people when, in their flight from Egypt, they passed over the Red Sea. Exodus chapter 14, verse 29. And now that prophetic emblem is fulfilled in truth when Christ is led as a sheep to the slaughter. Isaiah 53:7. That by his blood sprinkled on our doorposts, that is, by the sign of his cross, marked on our foreheads, we may be delivered from the perdition, awaiting this world as Israel from the bondage and destruction of the Egyptians. Exodus 12:23. And a most salutary transit we make when we pass over from the devil to Christ and from this unstable world to his well-established kingdom. And therefore surely do we pass over to the ever-abiding God, that we may not pass away with this passing world. The Apostle, in extolling God for such grace bestowed upon us, says, who has delivered us from the power of darkness and has translated us into the kingdom of the Son of his love. Colossians 1:13. This name then of Pascha, which, as I have said, is in Latin called transitus, Passover, is interpreted as it were for us by the blessed evangelist when he says, before the feast of Pascha, when Jesus knew that his hour was come, that he should pass out of this world to the Father. Here, you see we have both Pascha and Passover. Whence and whither does he pass? Namely, out of this world to the Father. The hope was thus given to the members in their head that they, doubtless, would yet follow him who was passing before. And what then of unbelievers who stand altogether apart from this head and his members? Do not they also pass away, seeing that they abide not here always? They also do plainly pass away. But it is one thing to pass from the world, and another to pass away with it. One thing to pass to the Father, another to pass to the enemy, for the Egyptians also passed over the sea, but they did not pass through the sea to the kingdom, but in the sea of destruction. When Jesus knew then that his hour was come, that he should pass out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them unto the end. In order, doubtless, that they also, through that love of his, might pass from this world, where they now were, to their head who had passed hence before them. For what mean these words, to the end, but just to Christ? For Christ is the end of the law, says the Apostle, for righteousness to everyone that believes. Romans 10:4. The end that consummates, not that consumes, the end whereto we attain, not wherein we perish. Exactly thus are we to understand the passage. Christ our Passover is sacrificed. 1 Corinthians 5:7. He is our end, into him do we pass. For I see that these gospel words may also be taken in a kind of human sense, that Christ loved his own even unto death, so that this may be the meaning of he loved them unto the end. This meaning is human, not divine. For it was not merely up to this point that we were loved by him who loves us always and endlessly. God forbid that he whose death could not end should have ended his love at death. Even after death, that proud and ungodly rich man loved his 5 brethren. Luke 16:27-28. And is Christ to be thought of as loving us only till death? God forbid, beloved. He would have come in vain with a love for us that lasted till death, if that love had ended there. But perhaps the words, he loved them unto the end, may have to be understood in this way, that he so loved them as to die for them. For this he testified when he said, Greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. John 15:13. We have certainly no objection that he loved them unto the end, should be so understood, that is, it was his very love that carried him on to death. And the supper, he says, having taken place, and the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he has come from God and is going to God, he rises from supper and lays aside his garments, and took a towel and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. We are not to understand by the supper having taken place as if it were already finished and over. For it was still going on when the Lord rose and washed his disciples' feet. For he afterwards sat down again and gave the morsel to his betrayer, implying certainly that the supper was not yet over, or, in other words, that there was still bread on the table. Therefore, by supper having taken place is meant that it was now ready and laid out on the table for the use of the guests. But when he says, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, if one inquires what was put into Judas' heart, it was doubtless this, to betray him. Such a putting into the heart is a spiritual suggestion, and enters not by the ear, but through the thoughts, and thereby not in a way that is corporal, but spiritual. For what we call spiritual is not always to be understood in a commendatory way. The apostle knew of certain spiritual things, powers of wickedness in heavenly places, against which he testifies that we have to maintain a struggle. Ephesians 6:12. And there would not be spiritual wickednesses, were there not also wicked spirits. For it is from a spiritual being that spiritual things get their name. But how such things are done, as that devilish suggestions should be introduced, and so mingle with human thoughts that a man accounts them his own, how can he know? Nor can we doubt that good suggestions are likewise made by a good spirit in the same unobservable and spiritual way. But it is matter of concern to which of these the human mind yields assent, either as deservedly left without, or graciously aided by, the divine assistance. The determination, therefore, had now been come to in Judas' heart by the instigation of the devil, that the disciple should betray the Master, whom he had not learned to know as his God. In such a state had he now come to their social meal, a spy on the shepherd, a plotter against the Redeemer, a seller of the Saviour. As such was he now come, was he now seen and endured, and thought himself undiscovered. For he was deceived about him whom he wished to deceive. But he who had already scanned the inward state of that very heart was knowingly making use of one who knew it not.